Emma Vaughan-Jones, and tonight on From the Frontline, I have with me in the studio Dr. Peter Hammond. Good evening.
Good evening, Emma. Good to be here.
Awesome. Lovely to have you with us. So, in 1865, Hudson Taylor launched the China Inland Mission, which was the first interdenominational faith mission. And since then, we've had many other missions that have followed suit. But tell us a little bit about this, Dr. Hammond. What were some of Hudson Taylor's principles for a faith mission, and how does a faith mission work out practically?
Well, yes, I got to know about Hudson Taylor in the first mission I worked to, which was Hospital Christian Fellowship. Francis Grimm was adamant Hospital Christian Fellowship, which is now Healthcare Christian Fellowship, is a faith mission. Hudson Taylor taught the principles: no fundraising. All missionaries must raise their own support. No missionaries receive salaries. We trust in the Lord to supply all their needs. No debts will be incurred. Like, wow, that sounds pretty incredible. How does this work?
Yeah.
And so in Hospital Christian Fellowship, now I was a youngster. I was just 19 years old. And in the 6 months before my military call-up began, I had a mid-year call-up. I was working at Hospital Christian Fellowship, and then for 18 months afterwards. So I got 2 years experience at Hospital Christian Fellowship. And honestly, there were times when we sat down to eat and gave thanks for the food when there wasn't food.
Sure.
And food was delivered after the prayer, that sort of thing. Weird.
Wow.
Extraordinary. But so Hudson Taylor launched what became the largest mission of the 19th century. At the end of the 19th century, by the year 1900, China Inland Mission was the largest mission with more hundreds of missionaries in the field in China, in the inland of China, than any other mission in the world. And they were operating on a faith mission basis. Now, when they started, they were scorned. Like, this can't work. All missions before China Inland Mission were denominational missions. They were denominational missions where the denominations would take a certain portion of each congregation's contributions, put it towards their mission, like the Baptist, Presbyterian, Church of England, whatever missions, and it would enable them to hire and send people to field. That was standard, and that worked, and it was logical. And then along comes Hudson Taylor, who didn't have a denomination behind him. He decides to launch an interdenominational mission because he sees all the other missions are on the coast, which of course is safer, easier, and you can get more protection from your government's navy if need be. And it was considered not just too dangerous, but impractical to work in the inland of China or anywhere else. And so what Hudson Taylor did was, we're going to go to the hinterland, which was meaning you're far away from support, logistics, and all the rest of it. And the African Inland Mission followed, and the Sudan Interior Mission followed, and a whole lot of others.
Sure.
So these faith missions were inspired by the whole idea that God's work, done God's way, will not lack God's supply. God's servant is God's responsibility. So these are some of the great titles that Hudson Taylor rallied the work under. And he also said, the battle is the Lord's and he will conquer. We may fail. We do fail continually, but God never fails. And so he had on his desk the verse in the Bible, have faith in God. Sure. Which, if you go to Wellington, you can see in the South Africa General Mission training house, which is called Samuel by Andrew Murray. He has on the side, one of the sides of it, in big bold letters, have faith in God, which comes straight from Hudson Taylor's vision. So I learned about this around the prayer table and the dinner table at the Hospital Christian Fellowship, all these giants of the faith who knew so much more than I did, and I was just a brand new Christian in my first mission, and I was the youngest and the least. But it put an interest in me. Well, I must read about the C.T. Studd and Hudson Taylor and all the rest. Yeah. So I read those when I was in my military training. And so Hudson Taylor's vision was extraordinary, because he also said missions shouldn't be run by some committee back at home. It should be run by the missionaries who take the risks in the field, which was radical. Also, up till then, all missions only took ordained people to the field. And for the first time, he would take people who were not ordained necessarily or theologically trained, but had a call. And also unique was Hudson Taylor would take single women. Before him, only married women could go to the field. There was no such thing as a single woman going into the field. So Hudson Taylor was an innovator on such a range. So you could say here's the founder of the first interdenominational faith mission. And many who were scorning his methods later were adopting his practices and principles.
Sure, that's absolutely incredible. How inspiring. And then you also mentioned C.T. Studd. Did he have a similar principle? What's his testimony?
Oh, C.T. Studd was even more radical. C.T. Studd came from a phenomenally wealthy family where they had this colossal estate. They actually had their own cricket pitch at the back. They had their own horses and horse racing and everything else. And when his father got converted and he got converted, and he was at that stage the number one cricket player in the world.
Sure.
He was the top cricketer. They called him the best all-round cricketer. He had been the captain of the Eton teams, and in fact, each of the three brothers, he and his two brothers, were captain of the Eton team in succession.
Wow.
And he and his brothers ended up on the English team, who went to Australia and won the Ashes. When Australia beat England, they burned the stumps of the wickets and put the Ashes in a trophy.
Is that cricket?
And then the trophy, which contained the ashes of, because the English team's glory was in ashes. So he led the team through to win the Ashes back, to bring the trophy back to England, and hence began the whole Ashes trophy thing. Well, C.T. Studd was the top cricketer of the country, which was the greatest political, economic power at the time, military power, spiritual power too. And he gave up cricket to be a missionary. So people thought he was insane, but he was more insane than that, because he received, just before going as a faith missionary with Hudson Taylor's China Inland Mission to China, he, as part of the Cambridge 7, were of course preparing to go there, living by faith. You can't do fundraising. You've got to trust the Lord. You just keep busy about God's work. He'll worry about your needs. And so you're not allowed to take up offerings at meetings and so on. Well, he gets this inheritance, phenomenal inheritance. I mean, he's the equivalent of today a multimillionaire. And he calmly writes out 3 checks to one to the Salvation Army for them to fund 50 missionaries to India, another to Salvation Army, General William Booth's ministry, which launches them phenomenally, another to D.L. Moody to enable him to build his Bible college in Chicago, and he leaves nothing for himself. And he says, no, he's not going to have everyone else have the fun of trusting the Lord by faith to go to the field, and he's got his own private resource, so he gave away all his inheritance. And his wife, Priscilla, who was from Salvation Army background, she decided to do the same with her inheritance. And he said, no, you should keep for yourself. She said, I'm not going to have you outdo me in faith. And she donated all hers away. And so they went out the field poverty-stricken. And they ran medical clinics, did all sorts of things in the field. And you just think, these people really were weird. I mean, it's because if we had a windfall or a whole lot of money, we would think, well, praise God, he's provided.
Yeah.
But they had the idea of, no, you give that away. And what was also extraordinary about both Hudson Taylor and C.T. Studd, which I was taught again by Francis Grimm, the founder of Hospital Christian Fellowship, remember, you tithe on what you get. So it doesn't matter how poverty-stricken you are, there's always others who have even less than you. Just like there's always people who know more than you that you need to learn from. There's people who know less than you that you need to teach. So there are people who are worse off than you that you need to tithe to. And so they were tithing from what had been received as donations for their mission, as designated giving. And so from the earliest days in our mission, we have tried to do this too. And praise God, I think most of the time we've done more than tithe, giving to other missions and ministries that are needed. And of course, to do it in your own personal family. It's a wonderful way of ensuring that God's work gets support, when I've always got 10% of what income I get to at least give that much to others that I know of that are needing. As a missionary who travels a lot, you get to know of a lot of needs. So,
Absolutely.
So it's quite extraordinary. But the C.T. Studd, he launched not only as part of Hudson Taylor's mission, China Inland Mission to China, when he's invalided out for health. He then went back after recovering to India, ministered there. When health forced him back to England, he then launched the Heart of Africa mission, which is today WEC, Worldwide Evangelization Crusade back then. And he went to the Congo. When he was people looked at this man over 50 and said, he's too old for the mission field, especially the Congo. And that was the most desperately needy mission field on the planet, as remote as you could be. And he drew a line from the north to the south and from the east to the west across Africa, and where it was in the smack middle of Africa, that's where he put his mission base, just on the map. No research, and he went there by bicycle. I mean,
Wow.
Here's about as wild a person as you could imagine, translate who knows how many, the Bible to how many languages. Phenomenal amount of work. Today there's hundreds of thousands of Christians descendants of those that he first converted amongst cannibals.
Sure.
He was doing his first baptisms in the Congo River with a revolver, Webley 38 revolver in one hand, firing to keep away the crocodiles while doing baptism in the river because, as he said, a crocodile can ruin a baptism.
Oh my word, yeah, just a little bit. That's amazing. Sure, so would you say then, Dr. Hammond, that this way of running missions and that type of thing is biblical? Are there biblical examples or examples in the Bible of missionaries and stuff doing this in the olden days?
Well, certainly you can think the Lord Jesus saying to his disciples and when he was training them, he told them, don't take purse or sandals or anything, sent them out. Of course, afterwards he was telling them, now in the past I told you to not, now I say, take sandals, take staff, take purse, and if you don't have a sword, sell a cloak and buy one. So the Lord told them to make precautions, but you don't see the Lord engaging in fundraising like the Pharisees and the priests did in the temple. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with taking up offerings. God's work's got to live, and tithing is taught in the Old Testament without a doubt, and the temple was considered a storehouse from which they supported widows and orphans, and a good church is involved in that. So in the book of Acts you see there were deacons appointed in the church to deal with tithes and offerings and to care for widows and orphans, and to enable the apostles who'd been called to ministry to particularly focus on prayer and the word, both the studying of God's word and the preaching of God's word. So you see that, in fact, the Apostle Paul's ministry in the field was very much like that. And if you read through Corinthians, which in some ways is a report back to a supporting church, and also in many cases something of, well, Romans in particular is something of a fundraising letter too, where they are letting them know of needs. And many times Paul was thanking a church like at Philippi for the support they were sending back through him to go and help the brethren who were hard-pressed in Jerusalem. Because in Jerusalem the church had made sacrifices on the day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit came down and disciples went out and there were 3,000 converted. There were a lot of people who traveled around the world to Jerusalem for the Pentecost festival who hadn't planned to stay longer but now needed to stay longer to get more discipleship before they went back to plant the church in their areas. Now someone had to sacrifice to provide for these unexpected guests who had not budgeted for spending extra time. And so quite a few people sold their properties.
Sure.
Now you may think, well, that's a bit irresponsible. But bear in mind the Lord had prophesied, not one stone will be left on a stone, this temple will be torn down, Jerusalem's going to be surrounded, it's going to be destroyed. So they had inside trading info that this was bad investment and Jerusalem was doomed long term. And they sold away their property, which helped provide a booster stage for the early church. And therefore, other churches that benefit from this later were sending support back to help the destitute believers in Jerusalem. I mean, you can see cause and effect, economics, supply and demand. But still, if you look through the New Testament, you can see quite a few examples that the apostles, while they did tent making when they could, where churches were able to support them, they could put more of their attention to the actual work of the ministry. And yes, it's taught in the Bible that don't muzzle the ox that treads the corn, and then applying it to people doing God's work. In Corinthians, we read, especially in 2 Corinthians, that a pastor, a preacher, a teacher, a missionary, those who live by the gospel should be supported by those who are benefiting from the ministry. So you get different principles like that. You can certainly see that there was donations made for people going to ministry, and Paul even writing ahead saying, I'm sending these brethren to you, see that they don't lack anything in their ministry, and receive them. And so hospitality was one way that people advanced the gospel, and of course supporting as they were needed. So yes, it's thoroughly biblical, and it's certainly been practiced in church history.
Absolutely. Okay, that's fascinating. And so now Frontline Fellowship has adopted this principle as well, and they're a faith mission. How is Frontline a faith mission, and why is Frontline a faith mission?
Right, so in the 38 years of Frontline Fellowship, we've never taken up an offering.
Sure.
We've never done fundraising. We've never had a fundraiser. Wow. We don't do that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, as long as people use the funds for what it's designated for and in a God-honouring way.
Absolutely.
I think it's perfectly natural, normal, and right for a church to have offering times and so on and so forth. But we haven't done that. Now, there's several reasons. So one thing is that so many churches and especially televangelists have given the impression that some people, when they think of Christian work, they just think money. Because so many of these characters, especially on TV, seem to be talking about money so much. And I've been to some churches where the taking up the offering can be a whole 15-minute or more deal, as they make a whole big spiel and speech and this and that, and pressed down, shaken together, flowing over, and there's all kinds of, give and be given unto you, and pressed down, shaken together, and tenfold and hundredfold, and it's like one big massive high pressure twisting of your arm. So the place where they overdo it. So we just thought it was better to go the other direction, and we concentrate on God's work, and you fight God's battles, he'll fight yours. God's servant is God's responsibility. So Hudson Taylor's principle, which had been drummed into me at Hospital Christian Fellowship, that God's work done God's way will not lack God's supply. That made sense, and I thought, look, I'm not afraid of hard work, and I don't mind risking my life, but let me just leave the fundraising to God. And so, yes, so from the very beginning, we tried and wrote into our constitution and base of faith and all that this is how we were going to work. And in fact, the whole way how the mission began, we were born in prayer. I was doing my 2 years military service, and I'd just come out of 6 months work in Hospital Christian Fellowship. So I was prayed up and had vision. And Hospital Christian Fellowship's vision was more people pass to the hospitals of the world than through the churches. And so their focus was reach the hospitals, train the staff, hospital healthcare professionals to be evangelists and disciple makers and literature distributors. And it's strategic. And it's
absolutely.
And I remember Brother Andrew coming past doing devotions, and he was part of the board of HCF2. And he said, communists close churches, but they don't close hospitals. They can't close hospitals. And so a very good strategic way, a lot of the work being done behind the Iron Curtain was being done by Christian medical professionals. I know one of the most famous Muslim converts in Egypt, Mark Gabriel, whose books are phenomenally helpful, comparing Muhammad with Jesus and so on. He used to be a Muslim imam, professor in Cairo University, which is like the Oxford of the Muslim Middle East. And he would be training in history and in the Quran Muslim imams. Well, he got converted by a Christian pharmacist, Coptic Christian pharmacist in Egypt, who pressed on him to compare the Bible, compare Jesus with Muhammad, and he came to the Lord there. So definitely medical professionals have a strategic work. So they might clamp down churches, but how can they clamp down on medical work? So everyone needs doctors and pharmacists and hospitals. So that was the background. Now I went into the army, and very soon I thought, gee, you're in a mission field. And this is a mission field. And I started Bible study and prayer fellowship, and we met every night for Bible study and prayer throughout my 2 years. We had all-night prayer meetings frequently, generally about once a month, praying through the night on a Saturday night normally. And we prayed through Operation World Book, praying, obviously focusing on our neighbors like Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Angola, where a lot of our operational activities were taking place. These were called the Frontline states. That's what they call themselves. They were in the front line of the war against South Africa. And so we, being in the front line and as soldiers, wanting to be in the front line of missions, ministering to the frontline states, we adopted the name Frontline Fellowship. Again, you can see the ancestry, the DNA. I came from Hospital Christian Fellowship. Now we're starting Frontline Fellowship. It's, the young people of South Africa at that stage, well, we were conscripted. White South Africans were conscripted into the army. So again, it was a mission field. And the same kind of thinking I learned in HCF was doubtless guiding that. So at that time, we were at war with them, and they were at war with us. And Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, they were all supporting revolutionary groups, terrorists, as we called them, coming across the border with limpet mines to put in shops and landmines in the roads and car bombs in public streets. They were coming at us with bombs and hate. So we determined to go to them with Bibles and with the love and with the gospel of Christ. And most ministries have a major emphasis on fundraising. We decided, nope, we are not going to do this. We will focus on the work and let God worry about our support. And we'll do as much as we can or can't without it. So to think I've ministered now as a faith missionary for 38 years in 38 countries and 4 continents.
Wow.
I've never required speaking fees. When I get people saying, we'd like you to be a speaker at our conference, what is your speaking fee, or what do you charge? Which is normal. But I say, no, I'm a missionary. We'd be grateful if you could cover my traveling costs, and if you want to contribute anything to the mission, it's your choice, but I'll come. So similarly, when I write books, and I've always liked writing and researching, and many of the books we've written have been specifically because of the field, like In the Killing Fields of Mozambique, Holocaust in Rwanda, Faith Under Fire in Sudan, Missionaries in the Field, or books written with the field in mind, like Practical Discipleship, Putting Feet to Your Faith, Discipleship Handbook, Things Needed, Old Testament Survey, New Testament Survey, and so on. So I've never taken royalties from the books I've written and published, over 50 books and manuals.
Sure.
All proceeds go straight back into the mission. Everything that's been accomplished in and through our mission the last 38 years has been entirely due to God's grace alone, received by faith alone.
Wow, that's absolutely inspirational. But surely there has to also be times where you just have no money.
Many times, actually. Yes. In the early years in this mission, I hitchhiked 144,000 kilometers.
Wow.
And that was not just around South Africa, it was into Mozambique, into Zimbabwe, up to Rwanda, into Sudan. My first mission in Sudan, I was hitchhiking into Sudan. And I've gone without my own transport many times. And so this started with Francis Grimm, the founder of Hospital Christian Fellowship, taught me to live by faith. He issued me the call to join his ministry in Kemp Park by telegram. That was something that the post office would deliver to you. I know they've got something called telegram today, but we're talking
slightly
about
different.
There's strips that came on a piece of paper that was delivered to your door with the doorbell being rung, because this is quicker. So telegram. So I got a telegram.
Amazing. Have
haircut, report, 25 Oak Avenue, Kempton Park, soonest. And Kempton Park, isn't that 1,400 kilometers away? Now, by then, I didn't have so much as a rand to my name. I had to trust the Lord even for the train fare to reach Kempton Park.
Wow.
And when Uncle Francis sent me on a countrywide tour to visit all the Christian bookshops, which, by the way, at that stage was over 360, if I remember right.
Sure.
And to promote hard publishers' materials, I needed to do it by hitchhiking. Because, in fact, he said, I'm going to do what... And if you've read God's Smuggler, you know that Brother Andrew's ministry was taught to do the same, because he went to WEC, Worldwide Evangelization Crusade, C.T. Studd's missions, Bible College in England, and they required everything to be by faith too. And so they would say, right, now when you start your Around Britain tour, you're going to do this by faith, but we're going to help you. We're going to give you £10. But when you come back, you're going to give it back to us. It's just to get you started. So
Wow.
Francis Grimm,
Sure.
the one time he gave me some money, he once gave me 10 rand, and he said, okay, you're going to go on a around the country tour. I'll give you your first 10 rand. And interesting, he didn't require it back.
How generous.
But I went all around the country, and so where did I stay? Well, sometimes you're being hosted by Christians, and but many times, I just rolled my sleeping bag out on the side of the road in a park. If it was raining, in a telephone box. We used to have telephone booths, actually. We actually had a bit of doors. I slept in bathrooms. I've slept in petrol stations. And there were times even when I went to the local police station, it was pouring with rain, and said, do you have a cell I could sleep in? And police were very welcoming. Well, and I must say, clean sheets, clean pillows. It was none of the flea-ridden things that you'd get today.
That's amazing.
It was a nice bed. Okay, pretty. I mean, like, we're not talking about a mattress. It was like wooden or concrete base with a thin mattress on it. But it was fine. And it was out of the rain. So there were times, I remember, in a pouring rain, climbing into a tree house to sleep in somebody's back garden. Back then, people didn't have fences around their property. They had a little hedge maybe to keep the poodle in. But, so there were times I slept in Wendy houses. I remember many times I slept in churches. Because back then, I'm talking about the 80s, it was quite common not to lock churches.
Church doors,
and so I'd go to church sometimes very nice Church of England or Anglican type churches, and where they've got all kinds of valuables in the church. And the front door wasn't locked. I'd go in, lie in a pew on the carpet, stretch out my sleeping bag, sleep there. I remember sleeping in a very, 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 very hot summer's day in Port Alfred in the baptistry, which of course didn't have any water in. This was the coolest place in the church. Put my sleeping bag out there.
Yeah.
And I didn't even get into the sleeping bag. It was so hot.
Yeah.
Then what also happened frequently in the rain was I'd go to a used car lot and try the doors, and inevitably there were doors not locked. And again, this is before car lots were fenced in and all that. And there wasn't even a security. And I'd sleep in the car, put the seat back and get a sleep outside the rain. So I hitchhiked around like that, and that was quite common.
Yeah.
Walking, and I remember one time I fell asleep under the stars in a park in George, and I woke up to pouring rain.
Oh no!
And I just covered my head on. In the morning, I got out soaked, and the sleeping bag was soaked, and I pulled the sleeping bag up, and water poured out of the sleeping bag.
Oh,
my boots were soaked. Everything was soaked. I was soaked. And I was, you start your day in the winter and cold, he's hitchhiking, dripping wet.
Oh dear.
So sometimes it was a bit fun and challenging.
But sure.
So there were some extraordinary ways of hitchhiking. So on one occasion, I had to get from Johannesburg to Port Elizabeth in less than a day, which is 1,100 kilometers, which is actually impossible.
Yes.
You don't tend to get a lift one way. And from Joburg to Pretoria, there's no one exactly straight road. So I knew this was virtually impossible. And I felt led to go to Lanseria Airport, which wasn't far. I was hitchhiking, saw Lanseria Airport, thought, let's go in. I walked up the control tower, again, no locks or gates or security. And I said, do you know any aircraft flying through Port Elizabeth that day? And incredibly, there was a new helicopter needing to be delivered to PE. So they said, well, let's speak to the pilot. And he was quite happy, cheerfully offered me a free ride on this brand new, lovely Bell helicopter. It was obviously some kind of executive helicopter. It still had like the plastic on the seats, and it was so new. It had this extraordinary multicolored radar, which you could see the topography as you were flying over. And I'd never seen anything like it before. So I arrived in such comfort and style, stopping off at Bloemfontein. I remember walking across the tarmac for the fuel stop there, and the police opening the door and thinking I was some important person. Whereas meanwhile, I was just a hitchhiker.
You were just hitchhiking on a helicopter.
So
That's
every
hilarious.
one of these hitchhiking opportunities gave me opportunity to witness to hundreds of motorists and a few pilots, and to distribute lots of gospel literature on the way.
That's absolutely inspirational. That's amazing. But so now, what happens, for example, now if the mission runs out of money, or like in the past few years, if like the mission doesn't have money, what happens? How does the mission keep running?
Yes, well, again, I learned from other missionaries. So George Verver, who's a friend of the family and a friend of my father-in-law and my wife and myself, George Verver started Operation Mobilization. He said, well, I'd give my missionaries books and said, if you want to eat, you've got to sell books, because that's the only funding you've got. And they would go out and they had to put book tables out, make book tables. And they had this little card table thing they carried with them. So it wasn't very big. And they would sell books on the side of the road, and that's how they managed. That's how they started their mission in Mexico, Spain, and so on. And so, well, we've tended to have books from earlier stage, even if there weren't that many at the beginning. And so I remember times where if I didn't sell books in Lanesburg, I wouldn't have reached George, reached Beaufort West. If I didn't sell books, I wouldn't have reached Bloemfontein. Wow. And from Bloemfontein got to Joburg. So I sold books all the way up to Zambia, into Malawi and Mozambique and back. And on the way back, I didn't have enough money for fuel. I didn't tend to sell books much in Zambia and so on. The kind of church we were at couldn't afford it. There are churches which can afford buying books, but not the ones I was going to at that stage. So I sold our spare tire, and I sold my spare shoes. I had a pair of running shoes and boots. And that got me fuel to get me back to South Africa. Then I could sell more books and so on. So it doesn't always go that easily. Now, there are times that you've got to cancel missions. and there's times that you've got to delay printing of this Bible printing project or other book project. So unfortunately, you can imagine as the funds run low, the fuel runs low, things go slower or actually need to be postponed or even cancelled. So that does happen. And there have been at times that we've really, really, really struggled. So on one occasion, it was 1992. I had one child, Andrea, who was only a year old, and we had a backlog of printing bills. Things hadn't come through as expected. We were in desperate state financially. All I could do was sell my car. Now, we only had one car, my car, which meant my wife and I didn't have a car. I had a motorbike still, and I'd go to the post office and load up mail sacks and so on, mail sack in front, mail sack behind. If there's more than 2 mail sacks, well, have to come back. And we also had a little Beetle as the only mission vehicle. We had one bakkie in the field, very small, 1400. So in town, if my wife needed to do anything, she needed to get the mission's VW Beetle, fit baby and all the other paraphernalia, prams and so on in the back of this little two-door Beetle, old VWs. And so we managed for a long time before we got the funds to get another vehicle and so on. So that does happen. But, you know, it's just extraordinary. Just to give you the kind of idea of how things happen, I remember going on a mission. I was leaving King Williamstown, actually, on a mission to Mozambique. And I didn't have enough fuel to reach Mozambique. But I did have enough for this next tank, but not the following one. Well, at the petrol station at King Williamstown, the owner of this fuel station came out and said, "What, all these Christmas stickers on your website? Jesus Lord, my helmet out, Jesus Saves in front of this red motorbike of mine, 250 off-road Scrambler, Honda." And so he asked, and I was very heavily laden, World Missionary Press Gospel booklet, boxes in each saddlebag, and what's in the backpack, and the Jesus film, 4 reels. And he heard about this, and he said to the petrol tent, "This is complimentary, don't charge him." He said, "I'd like to fill your tank for this first one." Now, I mean, that's kind of rare. Very rare.
Absolutely.
But this sort of amazing things, I've had occasions when I remember once going through Port Alfred and it was pouring with rain, and I was thinking, oh no, another night in the rain. And I was just at that point walking past a hotel lodge type of place, and I walked up and I saw they had a nice big broad veranda, and I walked to the person in front and said, "Would you mind if I laid out my sleeping bag on your veranda out of the rain?" And he said, "Just a minute." She walked and spoke to the manager, came out and said, "Here's the keys to one of our rooms." And I said, "I can't afford it." He said, No, that's on the house. You're welcome." I mean, that's just extraordinary. Another time I remember in the middle of the Transvaal, little town, I can't even remember the name of the town, it was one of these little door piece, and I was walking along, and again it was getting dark and it was starting to rain, and I went to knock on someone's door again to ask. They didn't have fences, gates or anything. They had a nice big broad veranda. "Would you mind if I just slept on your veranda?" Again, this person invited me in. My son's away, take his bed and so on. These are strangers.
Wow.
But so there was a lot more hospitality too.
For sure.
But I was continually astounded. How could I operate on something like, if I think my first 6 months in Hospital Christian Fellowship, I don't think I got 50 Rand in 6 months.
Sure.
But I managed. Isn't that
amazing.
just amazing? And
Extraordinary,
I didn't buy bus tickets, train tickets, things like this.
Yeah.
It was just trusting Lord, hitchhiking, and staying where the Lord provided.
What's also so amazing is just like, as you've been giving these examples and stories and whatnot, it's often in the times of most, like the most distraught times, in the pouring rain or in these times of need, that we suddenly notice the Lord's provision. But when things are going, when the sun's shining and things are easy, we're not as noticing of His graciousness and His generosity.
No, in fact, that's something I've heard people like Hospital Christian Fellowship missionaries and others saying, that they feel sorry for the denominational missionaries who have a short income, the backing of a whole denomination. They've got the resource, they've got the vehicles, the funds are dealt with, they've got the petrol cards, they don't have to worry about a whole lot of things. And he said, they don't, experience what we experience, they miss out. And so while they might look at us and think, gee, we feel really sorry for these poor faith missionaries. I've heard faith missionaries saying the same thing, saying, we feel really sorry for these well-funded denominational missionaries.
You get to see God's hand at work in everyday living. That's amazing. But so you quoted Hudson Taylor earlier saying that God's work done God's way will not lack God's supply. But I suppose a very operative phrase in there is done God's way, not just God's work done however we want.
Very much so. That's his emphasis. And so when we have financial crunches and things aren't working that well, or you suddenly find, wow, the old Mother Hubbard's cupboard is bare, the first thing to do is self-examination. Am I being God's servant, and am I doing God's work God's way at this moment? Is there something we could be doing better? Is there something we're missing? Is there something we're not doing that we should be doing? Are there ways that we could be better stewards of the resource God's entrusted us? So it's always good during a time of financial frugality, scarcity, drought, that we have heart examination. And so we've had times in our mission when we've had days of prayer and repentance at major crisis times, and always the Lord guides us, shows us different things. So that it's like God getting our attention. He whispers through creation, he speaks clearly through his word, but he shouts in our pain.
Absolutely.
Get our attention when we weren't paying attention.
True, for sure. So what are some upcoming projects that Frontline has planned?
We've got actually quite a lot. We praise God that already this year we've had a great Biblical Worldview Summit with about 100 people there. We've had a very effective Great Commission course. We had the March to Parliament, which went very well. Again, good turnout this year. And then around South Africa Mission, I had the privilege of ministering at the Ministers' Conference at Kwasabanta Mission, which had the largest turnout ever. I remember when they were getting 600 and then 800 and 1,000 and 1,200, and thought, this is massive. I mean, where do you get ministers' conferences in Africa with that many? And the last time I spoke at it was over 2,000. And this year there were 2,500 participants from 29 countries. Sure. People from as far afield as Russia, all over Africa, West Africa. So just amazing. And what a good strategic time for literature distribution, delivering New Testament surveys to pastors and missionaries from literally all over Africa and Europe. And been ministering at Back to the Bible. And then our mission teams just all safely returned from the biggest Bible distribution ever. Now, I had the record for many years. In 1998, I delivered 9,700 Bibles and New Testaments, which is almost 3 tons, to Sudan, officially Islamic Sudan, 1998, which at that stage, as far as we knew, and nobody's ever told us of a bigger one, the largest shipment of Bibles ever delivered to an officially Islamic country.
Wow.
And for many years, 9,700 was the record. Well, last year, Ben, Hunter, John, Aubrey, they beat that. They took in 40,000 Bibles, 50,000 Story of Jesus books. So, and that broke the record. And this year they broke that record. They took in another 40,000 Bibles and 50,000 Story of Jesus books, and a whole lot of other study Bibles, other books, all sorts of things. 118,000 Bibles and books.
Wow.
And that was this year in May. Praise God. And it all came back safely from the most remote, difficult, dangerous mission field on earth in many cases. Nuba Mountains, an island of Christianity and Sea of Islam. So we've already achieved quite a lot. I've done 3 missions so far this year out of town. We've had a whole lot of great workshops, creation workshops, Muslim evangelism workshops and so on. Good turnouts. Just done the Back to the Bible conference here. So things have been going well, but suddenly we've come to a skiddy halt. At the end of the previous month, meaning the end of April, we had no funds at all, and basically my wife's and she didn't have a car. She took her entire inheritance money available and made available for her to get a car, which got sucked into paying support salaries or whatever was coming off the end of month debit orders and so on. Sure. So that was end of April. So we managed through May. Now at the end of May, we just scraped past, but we still got a lot of even support for last month that's not paid at all. So here we have come into June, and we're in such a point that we can't even send out normally in June, we've got several missions on the go. I remembered that 2 years ago, we sent 3 missions into the field in June, which included all the way up through Zambia and Malawi and so on. And I was going on an SA mission up to the Bible consultation, which is the Bible school consultation, tends to happen about the middle of this month every year. And that's always strategic, 100 to or so people from about 20 Bible colleges from about 7 countries around Southern Africa. And we've distributed a lot of Bibles and books. They're very strategic. But I can't think of that now because we don't have the funds for fuel. We don't have the funds for any mission right now, air tickets, and so on. So while we've accomplished a phenomenal amount so far in the first 5 months of this year, we suddenly come to an abrupt, okay, that's it. Account's empty. Now, you'd normally have some reserves. Well, yes, we've sucked those dry too, which means every kind of ancillary sister mission of ours, Christian Liberty Books, Living Waters Africa, Gospel Defense League, Africa Christian Action, we've vacuumed those accounts dry. We don't have any other reserves. So sometimes FFUSA might have something extra in there, but they don't. So we've done everything we can. And so when you've done everything you can, then you've got to trust God to do what you cannot. And that's where we are. So we're at a place where we don't have the basic funds to keep going on normal basis. So we're cutting back, you're saving money whenever you can. But it's at times like this that I think maybe many of the supporters of the mission don't always understand how faith missions work. And they may think, oh, well, if they've got needs, they'll tell us. Well, generally speaking, we don't. So we could be in the middle of a mega financial crisis and we host a whole lot of people over here for homeschool open day. And we don't expect people to pay for it. Our teaching is for free. We would be grateful if they'd cover the food costs for catering. But generally speaking, it's like speaking to us. I went out to Worcester this weekend for ministering. And they asked me, like they often do, when inviting to minister, what's your speaking fees? And I'd say, well, I'm a faith missionary. We don't charge anything. But if you can cover our petrol, we'd be grateful. Travel costs. And do you know there's many, many places. In fact, I'd say most of the ministry we do, the vast majority of the ministry we do, the host churches either can't or don't cover our travel costs. So sure. I would say it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that not 10% of the churches and schools that we minister in contribute to our costs. And I don't think many of them can. Many of them are some of the most destitute, needy. We go to some of the most needy places in everywhere from Malawi to Tanzania to Sudan. You can't expect them. Sometimes I've been in totally destitute churches and they come as I'm leaving and they give me some eggs or some mealies or something like this. And you know that they're giving you what they can. Or I've been given a bag of nuts, like macadamia nuts, which is very nice, or cashew nuts from Mozambique. Mozambique, you'd often get nuts.
Cashew nuts, yes.
Bananas. And you can see they're giving you what they can. But once in Mozambique, I was given a chicken. I thought,
what are you going to do with that?
Well, I put them on the back of my motorbike.
Traded with it.
Went the very next village I came to, I gave them the chicken. So I arrived with gift chickens.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with a chicken on the road? So anyway,
so
people do try to help you the way that they can. But wow, just an example of how God can provide, which is amazing. I didn't used to minister in Europe much, but in 1987 I went on my first mission to Mozambique, to Europe, and I was going on. I'm talking about actually beginning of 1988. So it was end of 87. I was preparing. I was leaving in early January, and so I was going to go to East Germany, smuggling in Bibles, doing a whole lot of things in Germany, and so on. And as I go to the airport, I stopped by the post office to check because I bought the air tickets and all this under 1,000 rand. That was Europe, Britain, America, and back. Under 1,000 rand, but I was, wow, that's a lot of money. And but I had no more money for anything. From the time I arrived, I had nothing. There was no money left. This was it. And I went to the post office on the way to the airport, and there was an envelope from Reverend Erlo Stegen, Kwasabunta Mission. That's rare. I don't normally get a letter from him. Opened up, and what's in there? A lot of Deutschmark. And in notes, cash. He had never before sent me money. I had not got a letter from him that I recall before that time. And he didn't even know I was going to Europe or Germany. And it's exactly what I needed, Deutschmark. It's before the euro. And a couple of years later, I was on my way to Europe again for ministry behind Iron Curtain. And I got another envelope, came in the post, was delivered into our office and our desk, and opened up the day before I was leaving. More D-mark from Earl O'Stegan. And again, he couldn't have known that I was going, because we, as a mission to restricted access areas, don't tell people what we're doing ahead of time. So
That's
isn't it just extraordinary? God can lead and guide a specific need at a specific time, so specifically.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was exactly what I needed. And when he posted it, he couldn't have known. And
that's incredible.
In fact, when he posted, I probably didn't even know that I was going to.
That's amazing. That's a whole mindset that you must have to overcome. That's because we normally wanting to plan as much as we can. I've got to head to this place, and when I get there I need to have a strategic plan set up. This is where I'm going to be going, this is how I'm going to be accomplishing everything. But you set off with no specific, you got a plan, but you have no means of carrying it out. Yeah. Or even when people say, okay, what is your fee for speaking? And you know what your situation is back at the mission and back home, yet you've got to refuse the temptation to say, well, actually, it would be wonderful, but to say no, Faith Mission. And
freely received, freely give.
That's absolutely incredible. So what are some needs that Frontline has, and what are some ways people can be praying for Frontline?
Well, we are needing new vehicles. I must say, our old vehicles, in fact, our previous chairman of the board, Reverend Bill Bathman, he raised the money specifically. He actually did matching fund challenges to a whole lot of people, phoned them through. Sure. And he raised money to get a whole range of vehicles, like a four-wheel drive vehicle that's gone to stand many times. It's now on 237,000 kilometers on the clock. That's nearly 150,000 miles on the clock. A long wheelbase Bucky, our pickup truck, 192,000 kilometers, which is almost 120,000 miles on the clock already. These are getting old, and they're looking quite battered now. Shame. They looked so new once, but okay. Africa's rough on the vehicles. The roads are not easy. So we need these vehicles, and I must say they're getting quite old. And our principle in our mission is, when we need new vehicles, we donate our older ones to missions that don't do as much travel, but farms that need it. And there's always a mission that needs things more than we do. So we like to, because if we resell it, it's worth something, but it's worth more to other missions, because you don't have to have all the different sales and what have you. And why should the government get some sales tax out of selling something? So just donating it is going to help the kingdom of God more. But we do need more vehicles. We do need to, of course, pay our bills as well. Everything from electricity to plumbing and support for people and food. But fuel, massive expense. I don't think most people realize how in Africa the extra expenses that often come up when you try and cross borders, and so we've got to be creative. Those are some of them, but we've got a couple of major printing projects. We've got, for example, translations of major books into French and Afrikaans ready for printing as soon as we can get the funds for it. But I can't print anything until I settle the bills for the last things we printed. Like, I think we still owe about half of the New Testament survey books, which we've been distributing generously to pastors and teachers and Bible cultures all over. So we've also need some audio visual materials, like in fact we're lacking some PA system materials, but also mega voices, gospel messengers, the Bible audio in different languages. Those are some things we're trying to give to people in the places we go to. Those are some of the big needs. We're short of space. We'd like to expand this mission into the roof.
Absolutely.
And if there's more after that, we really want to get Livingston Farm, a farming training missionary facility that's self-supporting, where we can have our camps courses, obstacle courses, farm, and so on. Amazing. And train people in a whole lot of skills. So people want to come to us, Livingston Missionary School, where we would train them in everything from carpentry, plumbing, electricity, agriculture, mechanics, all the things that you need in the field, practically on a mission station, which is all those things and needs all those things. So it's not just the skills, but it's also an ongoing ministry base. And we've got more people wanting to work with us than we have space to accommodate. And so a farm would solve quite a lot of those problems. So those are some of our expansion goals. Converting our attic into a workable multi-purpose hall, and getting our farm out there where we can actually train people even more effectively. Then we can take a large number of young people each year to train them. Just like in the past, we used to go to the army for a couple of years. People could give their so-called gap years to missions and learn skills and discipline and living by faith.
That's an incredible mission vision. That's excellent. And just a little interesting thing there. How many kilometers did you say you hitchhiked earlier?
144,000.
144,000. So almost as much as one of the vehicles
has done the last 8 years.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's incredible. So you saved some wear and tear and fuel costs there.
I did.
For sure.
We did indeed. But of course, when you're hitchhiking, there's a limit to how much you can carry.
Absolutely.
I could carry maybe 50 kgs in my backpack. On my motorbike, I could carry a lot more, saddlebags and all that. But in our vehicles, we can take 2, sometimes up to, with the trailer, 3.5 tons of materials into the field. And so if you think of a frontline mission vehicle going across literally 12 countries, as we did in the Livingston 200 year 2013, and traveling 18,000 kilometers in the process, the very cost effective, just doing 3.5 tons while doing it. So yes, I managed to do quite a lot hitchhiking, but I couldn't carry as much.
No,
and I'd have to resupply regularly.
Very limited.
So I'd be stopping in a Scripture Gift Mission in Pretoria and the Christian Literature Centre in Durban, and loading up at Evangelical Mission Press in Cape Town, and Carver in Harare, and the Bible Society in Lilongwe, and so that was the way I had to work, and sometimes getting things pre-positioned. And anyone you knew traveling anywhere, could you take this box? Can you deliver this there? And we're still looking for couriers today, even. People who fly or drive anywhere. If they've got space, we'll provide them with Bibles and books, because the biggest problem today is postage. Printing is cheaper than postage today.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hammond. Those are all different visions and missions and outreaches and support and everything that people can be praying for. And if you want to contact Frontline, they can contact us at www.frontlineorg.za, which is the website.
Frontline Mission.
Frontline Mission.
We've updated it. It used to be Frontline.org. Frontline Mission SA.org. Or email mission@frontline.org.za.
True. Thank you very much. And yeah, let's remember that the battle is the Lord's and He will conquer. We may fail, and in fact we do continually, but we can have faith that the Lord never fails. Thank you very much, Dr. Hammond. Good evening.